Here's a number that should change how you spend your weekends. 50%. Having strong social connections increases your odds of survival by 50%. That's not a motivational poster. That's the finding of a 2015 meta-analysis by Julianne Holt-Lundstad at Brigham Young University, which pooled data from 148 studies covering more than 300,000 people. And here's the flip side. Loneliness raises the risk of premature death by roughly 26 to 29%, about the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. We regulate alcohol, we tax cigarettes, we spend billions on cancer research. Nobody is running public health campaigns telling people to get better friends. And yet, here we are. Strong social connections increase your survival odds by 50%. Loneliness is as deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. This isn't philosophy, it's epidemiology. Let me put this in evolutionary context, because it changes how you understand everything that follows. For almost all of human history, your social network was your survival system. Not metaphorically, literally. You didn't store food, you didn't have a pension, you didn't have a hospital. What you had was a group of people who would share meat with you when your hunt failed, who would help you if you were injured, who would defend you if you were threatened. Robin Dunbar, Emeritus Professor of Evolutionary Psychology at Oxford, author of Grooming, Gossip, and the Evolution of Language, has spent decades trying to understand how this social machinery works at the biological level. His finding? The capacity for friendship is hard-capped by the neocortex, the outer layer of the brain. The bigger the neocortex relative to the rest of the brain, the larger the social group the animal can sustain. In chimps, around 50 relationships. In humans, around 150. That became known as the Dunbar number. 150 is not the number of people you've met. It's the number your brain can actively maintain, tracking their lives, their moods, their reliability, what you owe them, and what they owe you. Beyond 150, people become faces you recognize, not people you actually know. The human brain can actively maintain around 150 relationships. That's not a cultural preference, it's a neurological constraint. And within those 150, Dunbar found something even more interesting, a nested layer structure that appears consistently across cultures and historical periods, confirmed in 23 independent studies. The innermost layer? About 5 people. Your support clique. The people you call at 3 a.m., the ones whose death would feel like losing part of yourself. Next, around 15. Close friends you see and talk to regularly. Then, around 50. People you genuinely like and would be happy to spend time with. And the full 150, your complete active social world. This 5-15-50-150 structure has been found in hunter-gatherer bands, medieval villages, military units, and corporate organizations. It predates social media, civilization, and probably language itself. It is, as far as we can tell, what human sociality looks like when it's working as designed. Here's the part nobody warned you about. Your brain spends approximately a third of its cognitive resources tracking social information. Who said what, who owes what, who can be trusted, who's in conflict with whom. This is staggeringly expensive for an organ that runs on 20 watts. Why would evolution pay that price? Because in the world where your brain was designed, the one where you had no food storage, no insurance, no state, your social network was your only margin of safety. Getting it wrong wasn't awkward, it was fatal. And here's how it worked before language. Grooming. Chimpanzees spend up to 20% of their waking hours picking through each other's fur. Not for hygiene, for social bonding. Every grooming session is a trust transaction. I do this for you, you do this for me. Alliance confirmed. But grooming has a hard limit. You can only groom one individual at a time. As human groups grew larger, one-on-one maintenance couldn't keep up. So language emerged, at least partly, as social grooming that scales. One person talks, everyone in earshot benefits. You can maintain more relationships faster at lower cost. Gossip, in Dunbar's framing, is not a vice. It's the ancestral technology that made large-scale human cooperation possible. Gossip isn't a character flaw. It's the ancestral upgrade from grooming, social bonding that scales beyond two people at a time. Now, a question for the comments. Think about the oldest friendship you still have. Not the most convenient one, not the one you see most often, the longest. How many years? And what is it specifically that has kept you connected through all the ways both of you have changed? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious whether the answers cluster around something specific. So, what did friendship actually look like for prehistoric humans? Hunter-gatherers lived in bands of roughly 20 to 50 people, the core group that moved, camped, and hunted together. These weren't acquaintances. These were the people your survival depended on day to day. Friendship in that context meant three things simultaneously. First, coordinated hunting. A single hunter is both dangerous and inefficient. A group can drive large prey that no individual could bring down. Trust within a hunting party determined whether you ate. Someone who was unreliable on a hunt wasn't just annoying, they were a liability to everyone's survival. Second, risk pooling. You have a good day, your neighbor doesn't. You share. Next week, the situation is reversed. This is a mutual insurance system, and it only functions when you can trust that the person you fed yesterday will feed you tomorrow. Friendship was the ledger that made this work. Third, coalitions. In small group politics, no individual can hold a position against a coordinated group. Your allies determined what you had access to: food, mates, protection, status, and who stood with you when conflict broke out depended entirely on the relationships you had invested in before the conflict started. The warm, pleasant feeling of liking someone was a bonus. The actual function was structural. Prehistoric friendship: hunting coordination, mutual risk insurance, political coalitions. The feeling of warmth was a useful side effect. Let me tell you about the longest scientific study of human life ever conducted. In 1938, Harvard researchers began following two groups of men, 268 Harvard sophomores and 456 young men from Boston's poorest neighborhoods, tracking their health, careers, relationships, and happiness across their entire lives. The study has now been running for more than 85 years. It's called the Harvard Study of Adult Development, and the current director is psychiatrist Robert Waldinger. The study is now expanded to over 2,000 people, original participants, their spouses, their children, their grandchildren. After 85 years, the conclusion is surprisingly simple. Good relationships keep us happier and healthier. Period. Not income, not career success, not IQ. The strongest predictor of health at 80 was how satisfied people were with their relationships at 50. And when the participants who reached their 80s were asked what they regretted most, the answer was nearly universal. They had spent too much time at work and not enough time with the people who mattered to them. Among those participants were former senior politicians, CEOs, Pulitzer Prize winners. Not one named a professional achievement as their primary source of pride or satisfaction. Only relationships. 85 years of data. The strongest predictor of health at 80 is relationship satisfaction at 50. Not wealth, not status, relationships. Here's the second question for the comments. At what age did you form the friendships that have meant the most to you? Childhood? School? University? In your 20s? Later? And what was present in that period that made it easier than it is now? Drop it below. I'm curious whether there's a pattern across people watching this. Now the uncomfortable part. We understand, at least intellectually, that relationships matter. And yet, adult friendship is in measurable decline across most developed countries. Why? Part of the answer is structural. In 2018, Jeffrey Hall, communication researcher at the University of Kansas, published a study in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships that put precise numbers on something most people sense vaguely: His finding? It takes roughly 50 hours of shared time to go from acquaintance to casual friend. Around 90 hours to become a genuine friend. More than 200 hours to become a close friend. 200 hours. That's 25 full working days. Your ancestors accumulated those hours automatically, living in the same band, sleeping near the same fire, sharing the same territory. The hours stacked up without effort. Modern life provides none of this infrastructure. You have to build it deliberately, in a schedule that doesn't have space for it. The math is harsh. If you see someone once a week for 2 hours, it takes nearly 2 years to reach the 200-hour threshold. And that's assuming the time is the right kind of time, relaxed, unstructured, shared. Hall's research found that work hours barely count. It's leisure time that builds friendship. 200 hours of shared leisure time to make a close friend. Modern life doesn't generate these hours automatically. You have to choose to. Second structural problem, vulnerability. Closeness requires self-disclosure, gradually sharing more about who you actually are, what you're actually afraid of, what you've actually gotten wrong. In a small prehistoric band, this was risky. Information about your weaknesses could be used against you. But it was also the only path to genuine trust. Not shared entertainment, not similar tastes. The moment of real connection is when one person says something true about themselves and the other person doesn't use it against them. Arthur Aaron, a psychologist at Stony Brook University, designed an experiment in 1997 to test whether closeness could be manufactured deliberately. His method? Pairs of strangers took turns asking each other a series of 36 increasingly personal questions. The original study title was The Experimental Generation of Interpersonal Closeness. After completing the questions, which took around 45 minutes in the lab setting, participants reported feeling significantly closer than control groups who engaged in ordinary small talk. Note what the study actually showed. Not that love is generated, but that closeness can be deliberately accelerated through structured, mutual disclosure. The mechanism is the same one that worked around campfires for 50,000 years. It's not romantic chemistry. It's an algorithm. Third structural problem. Men's friendships are more fragile than they appear. Dunbar's research identified a consistent gender difference in friendship style that has real health implications. Women's friendships tend to be built around face-to-face conversation, mutual disclosure, discussion of relationships, emotions, what's actually going on. This is emotionally expensive but resilient. It produces relationships that function as support systems. Men's friendships tend to be built around side-by-side activity, sport, work, shared projects. These bonds are real, but they're activity-dependent. When the activity disappears, when a job ends, a team disbands, a life stage changes, the friendship often disappears with it. The specific health risks this creates, men with purely activity-based social networks are significantly more vulnerable in crises, job loss, illness, divorce, bereavement, because they haven't established the habit of talking about what's actually happening. The network is there for the good times and absent for the hard ones. This doesn't mean men need to change how they bond. It means everyone, regardless of gender, needs at least one relationship where they can be honest about what's going on. Activity-based friendships are real, but they're fragile. They vanish when the activity does. Everyone needs at least one relationship where they can speak honestly. Fourth structural problem. Friendships have an expiry date. Dunbar found something that gets less attention than the 150 number. Without maintenance, friendships don't just stagnate, they actively degrade. If you stop seeing someone and stop being in regular contact, the relationship begins to cool. After roughly 2 to 3 years without contact, most friendships degrade from close friendship to acquaintance status. The emotional closeness drains away regardless of how strong the bond once was. In the prehistoric world, this wasn't a problem. Physical proximity guaranteed constant contact. In the modern world, where people move cities, change jobs, have children, change schedules, the maintenance doesn't happen automatically. It requires active decision-making. Most people don't make that decision until the friendship is already cooled past the point of easy recovery. Let's look at what prehistoric bands had that we've largely lost. Polly Wiesner of the University of Utah spent months with the Jew/Hawanzi of the Kalahari, the Kung people of Botswana and Namibia, recording conversations during the day and around evening fires. What she found? Daytime conversation among the Kung was roughly 3/4 practical. Who hunts where, who owes what, who did what wrong. Utilitarian, tense, oriented toward problems. Nighttime conversation by the fire was different. More than 80% of it was stories about people, events, spirits, the past, the absent, laughter, song, the texture of shared life rather than the management of it. Wiesner's argument? The evening fire created a specific social mode that daytime life didn't allow. Lower stress, higher disclosure, a kind of leveling in which social hierarchies temporarily relaxed. This is precisely the mode in which friendship deepens, not over work, not over structured activity, over unplanned, slightly aimless time spent in each other's presence. Modern life has largely eliminated this. We've turned free time into a productivity project. We schedule leisure-like meetings. We optimize our social interactions. We network. But what builds friendship isn't networking. It's sitting around, not doing much, and talking about nothing in particular. This is not a waste of time. This is how the 200 hours accumulate. What builds friendship? Unplanned, slightly aimless time together. Not networking events, not scheduled activities. The fire equivalent, time without agenda. One more thing worth naming. Your social network is also your reputation system. In the prehistoric world, your friends were your collateral. Who vouched for you? Who showed up when you were in trouble? Who shared food with you when you failed? The answers to those questions determined your status in the group, your access to resources, mates, and protection. That mechanism is still operating. We call it social capital now, but it's the same thing. The network of people who trust you, advocate for you, and open doors for you that don't exist from the outside. Jobs are found through people you know. Businesses are built on trust. Reputations are built by what the people who know you say about you when you're not in the room. We rename the prehistoric currency. We're still spending it every day. The closing frame. 3 different disciplines, evolutionary biology, neuroscience, and 85 years of longitudinal research, all arrive at the same conclusion. Strong social bonds are not a side benefit of a life well lived. They're one of the primary drivers of how long you live and how healthy those years are. We know this. And yet most of us chronically underinvest in friendship, treating it as something that will happen on its own, something to get to after the real work is done. But friendship doesn't happen on its own. It requires the 200 hours. It requires vulnerability. It requires the deliberate maintenance of relationships that will cool without it. Your ancestors didn't need to be told this. The cost of neglecting it was immediate and visible. For us, the cost arrives slowly, quietly, and usually too late. The oldest technology our species ever built still works. You just have to use it. Let me be specific about what using it actually looks like, because the research gives us a surprisingly concrete picture. Hall's study found something important beyond the hour thresholds. Not all hours count equally. Time spent working alongside someone contributes almost nothing to friendship development. Time spent in unstructured leisure, hanging out, joking around, doing nothing in particular, contributes significantly. This means that the colleague you've been working with for 3 years may feel like a friend, but often isn't. Not because the relationship isn't warm, but because the 200 hours haven't been accumulated in the right mode. The moment you stop working together, the relationship often reveals how little was actually there. This also explains a pattern many people notice after graduating from school or university. Friendships that felt effortless suddenly require enormous energy to maintain. The explanation isn't that you changed or they changed, it's that the institution was invisibly generating the hours for you. When the institution disappeared, so did the infrastructure. The practical implication. If you want to build a close friendship as an adult, you need to replicate what school did automatically: repeated, low-stakes, unstructured time with the same person. A regular activity that isn't about the activity. A reason to be together that isn't productivity. This sounds simple. Most people don't do it. One final thought. We are, by most measures, the most connected generation in human history, and possibly one of the loneliest. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy declared loneliness a public health epidemic in the United States in 2023. Research across multiple countries has shown rising loneliness, particularly among young adults and men. The paradox of having more tools for connection than any previous generation, while actually being more socially isolated, is real and well documented. Part of what drives this? We've confused contact with presence. Getting a notification is not the same as being thought of. Scrolling through someone's life is not the same as knowing them. Online communication, and Dunbar has been clear about this, can maintain existing friendships, but cannot build new ones. The hunter-gatherer brain inside you doesn't register digital contact as real connection. It's still waiting for someone to sit beside you. The 200 hours of shared time don't accumulate through texts and likes. They accumulate through being physically present with another person, repeatedly, over time. That's what the data says. It's also what your nervous system already knows. The oldest technology our species built is not complicated. It just requires showing up.